If everyone listening to this right now decided, that the money in their wallets was just worthless paper, the entire global economy would just collapse by Tuesday.
Oh, absolutely. By Tuesday afternoon at the latest.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a stack of really fascinating philosophical essays detailing a framework called reflective humanism.
Yes, and it's a pretty heavy topic, but incredibly relevant.
Totally. And our mission today is to look at these sources and ask a slightly terrifying question, honestly.
Yeah.
Why do we actually believe in the institutions that run our lives?
It is a question that forces us to look at the invisible structures we take for granted every single day.
Yeah, the things we just don't even question.
Exactly. I mean, we move through our days completely surrounded by systems that we treat as absolute, undeniable facts.
So like gravity.
Right, like gravity. You assume that when you get in your car, the traffic laws you follow are real. You accept that the state, the country you live in, actually exists. We navigate these structures with absolute confidence, treating them as if they're as solid as the ground we walk on.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the glaring gap in all of this is that, well, none of these things are physical objects.
They're not.
You can't reach out and touch a law. You can't, hold the state in your hand. Even the physical money is just paper or metal, right? The value itself is entirely invisible.
It's a collective hallucination, in a way.
Yeah. Yet these non-physical concepts function flawlessly in your life. They dictate where you can go, what you can own, and how you interact with literally everyone around you.
Which is why the framework of reflective humanism is just so compelling.
Tell me more about that.
So the sources we're looking at today, they argue that we need to stop looking at institutions through the lens of politics or historical power struggles or even who is currently in charge.
Okay.
Instead, they ask us to look at states and institutions purely as systems.
Yeah.
Systems that literally sustain our shared reality through a process the texts call interference.
Interference. Okay, wait, I have to stop you there because when I hear that word, I immediately think of a bad Wi-Fi signal or, government meddling.
Right.
Like someone is interfering with my life.
That is the common assumption, sure. But in this context, the sources are actually using the physics definition of the word.
Physics. Okay, how so?
Think of interference more like the overlapping ripples in a pond when you throw multiple stones into the water at the same time.
Okay, I can picture that.
The waves interact, they cross over each other, and they create a specific, stable pattern on the surface.
Oh, like an interference pattern.
Exactly. Reflective humanism starts with a pretty radical premise, honestly. Reality is not a fixed, objective stage that is just sitting out there waiting for us all to agree on it.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Instead, reality is an ongoing interference pattern.
So reality isn't a mountain we're all standing on. It's more like a dynamic pattern that is constantly being generated by these overlapping waves.
Precisely. And to understand how this works on a societal level, the sources draw a direct parallel to how consciousness itself is viewed in this framework.
Okay, this is getting deep.
It is, but bear with me. Reflective humanism argues that your consciousness isn't a fixed physical subject sitting inside your head.
Right, if a surgeon opens up your brain, they won't find a little glowing orb that is you.
Ballistically, it's just biology and electricity in there.
Yeah?
Consciousness is a phenomenon. It is an emergent pattern that rises out of overlapping memories, sensory inputs, emotions, and thoughts.
Oh, I see.
When all those different internal signals overlap, when they interfere with one another, a stable pattern emerges.
And that pattern is what you experience as your continuous inner voice.
Yes. What the sources do is take that exact same logic and apply it to society on a macro scale.
Wow, it sounds like society is basically operating like a giant collective consciousness.
In a structural sense, it actually is. Society is not just a collection of physical human bodies standing near each other. It is a massive field of overlapping meanings, language, and actions. When those things overlap and stabilize, they create the interference pattern that we casually call everyday reality.
That completely shifts how we look at everything,
How so?
Well, we usually think that institutions and reality itself are just inherently stable, like they just exist. We think a system, whether it's the financial system or the legal system, is stable because it's fundamentally true or maybe because it's morally right.
Right, the natural order of things.
Yeah. But if reality is just an interference pattern, you're saying that isn't the case at all.
The sources are very clear on this point, actually. Reality does not possess inherent stability.
None.
None. It is stabilized purely by continuous repetition. These institutions must be actively, relentlessly maintained.
Maintained.
Yes. They aren't physical rocks. They're ongoing performances.
That's crazy. It sounds like society is just a top spinning on a table.
A spinning top, I like that.
Yeah, because the top doesn't want to stand up. Standing up isn't its natural default state, right? If you
Hmm.
leave it alone, it falls over due to gravity.
Right.
It's only standing because someone keeps applying continuous momentum and energy to it.
That is a really helpful way to visualize it. Institutions are the spinning top. And if society's the top, we have to look at what provides that continuous momentum.
Right. How do you keep millions of people experiencing the exact same reality?
Well, the sources outline very specific maintenance mechanisms that keep the top spinning.
What are they?
They are language, records, education rules, and sanctions.
Okay, let's dig into the how of that. How exactly do those specific things like language or records maintain a reality? I mean, I can see how a police officer maintains rules, but how does language do it?
Think about the vocabulary we use every day. We repeat the same legal and cultural terms.
Okay,
A piece of land is physically just dirt and grass, right?
sure.
But the moment we apply the language of real estate, property lines, and zoning, we have completely altered how humans interact with that dirt.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we've overlaid a whole new reality on it.
Exactly. That language is a mechanism. Then we document our actions in a consistent way. That's records. You write down a deed. You record a transaction.
So by writing it down, we are essentially locking that specific interference pattern into place for the future.
Yes, exactly. The
Yeah.
record serves as the anchor. Then we use education to teach the next generation the exact same foundational concepts.
So they see the world the same way we do.
Right. We teach them the same maps, the same history, the same numerical values.
Hmm.
And finally, we enforce behavioral boundaries through rules and sanctions.
Okay, so it's a whole package.
Yes, when you repeat these elements over and over, you create a stabilized interference.
So when a judge bangs a gavel and says guilty, or a teacher grades a history paper, or, a county clerk stamps a property deed,
Yes.
they aren't just clocking in and doing their jobs. They're actively slapping the side of the spinning top to keep it going.
They are maintaining the pattern. When the same words are repeated, the same historical records are kept, and the same rules are enforced across millions of people simultaneously, the interference pattern locks.
But as you pointed out with the spinning top analogy, this means reality is incredibly fragile.
It is entirely fragile.
It has to be, because if it only exists because of this constant, exhausting repetition, then the second the repetition stops,
The reality collapses.
boom, it's gone.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really radical redefinition of what a state actually is within the reflective humanism framework.
Okay, how do they redefine it?
Well, normally if you ask someone to define a state or a government, they'll describe a geographical boundary, right?
Yeah, borders on a map.
Right. Or they'll describe an entity that holds a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. It's usually a very power-centric view.
Right, the state is the big imposing building that collects your taxes and has a military. It's raw power.
But the sources strip away that power-centric view completely.
Right.
Yes. In this framework, a state is simply a system that maintains the interference.
A system.
It is an apparatus designed specifically and almost exclusively to keep reality from collapsing. It is the machine that guarantees the repetition continues.
Oh man, it's like the state is a giant invisible server running a massive multiplayer online game.
A server, yes.
This server doesn't dictate every single choice you make in the game. You can still choose where your character walks, what job you take, who you talk to.
Right, you have agency.
Yeah, but the server constantly maintains the physics engine. It renders the boundaries of the map. It keeps track of the score. It does this so that you and millions of other people logging in are experiencing the exact same game world at the exact same time.
And if the server goes down,
The shared reality of the game just vanishes.
that server analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. The state provides the infrastructure for the shared interference pattern.
That makes so much sense.
But here's the problem. The game world cannot remain static forever. History shows us that societies evolve, technologies emerge, and populations change.
Right, the server has to update.
Exactly. The sources address this required evolution through a concept they call gradients.
Wait, if reality is locked in by repeating the exact same rules and the exact same records over and over, how does society ever evolve without just, breaking the simulation entirely?
Well, that is the central tension of maintaining a reality.
Sure.
The sources describe two different types of transitions or gradients.
Okay, what are they?
When the maintenance of reality adapts smoothly to new information, they call this a continuous generation or a question gradient.
Question gradient, got it.
In this state, the system remains open to inquiry. Language slowly adapts. Records are updated gradually. Reality changes quietly and painlessly.
So the top keeps spinning, but it smoothly transitions to a different spot on the table.
Exactly.
So that's the ideal scenario. The server updates the game in the background, the patch downloads overnight, and nobody really notices any disruption.
But history is rarely that smooth, is it?
Definitely not.
Usually, new realities emerge faster than the mechanisms can handle. When there's a sudden steep shift in how reality needs to be maintained, we experience what the sources call a collision gradient.
Collision gradient. That sounds bad.
The phase shift is too rapid. The interference pattern is fundamentally disrupted.
Can we ground that in a concrete example? Like, what does a collision gradient actually look like in the real world?
A great way to visualize a collision gradient is to look at massive, rapid technological shifts.
Okay.
Think about the sudden transition to digital remote work that happened globally a few years ago.
Oh, yeah. That was wild.
The physical rules of society broke down practically overnight. But the old records, the analog tax codes, the corporate real estate contracts, the legal definitions of a workplace, they did not update at the same speed.
Right. They were stuck in the old reality.
Yes. The old records clash violently with the new behaviors. The systems meant to maintain reality were suddenly enforcing rules for a world that literally no longer existed.
The server was lagging.
Exactly.
It was trying to run the new software on the old physics engine, and it just created massive friction. How does the framework describe what that friction feels like to the people living inside it?
The texts use a very evocative phrase for this. They say society experiences a collision gradient as transparent pain.
Transparent pain?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the discomfort of the OS, the operating system of society, grinding its gears.
Yeah.
It's transparent because you can't always point to a physical injury, but you feel the systemic breakdown. You feel it when the institutions you rely on suddenly seem to be operating in a completely different reality than the one you're actually living in.
The rules just no longer map to your environment.
Precisely.
That is such a visceral way to describe the feeling of living through a major historical disruption. It's that collective low-grade anxiety when you realize the game world isn't as solid as you thought.
It is incredibly unsettling.
And when the server starts glitching like that, it really forces you to confront your relationship with the game itself. Which, okay, this leads to something I found deeply counterintuitive in these sources.
I think I know what you're going to say. The definition of belief.
Yes. Because here's where it gets really interesting. If the state is just a server maintaining an interference pattern and institutions are just loops of repetition, what does it actually mean to believe in them?
Right.
We started this deep dive by asking why we believe in institutions. But looking at this framework, I have to ask, do we actually believe in them at all?
According to reflective humanism, our everyday definition of belief is completely flawed.
Okay, how so?
We usually think of belief as an inner conviction. We view it as a psychological trust.
Right.
For example, you believe in the legal system because you hold it in your heart as a moral good. You trust the banking system because you mentally feel confident in its stability.
Right, like if you're listening to this and thinking, no, I follow the law because I have strong morals and I believe in justice, the sources actually argue against that being the mechanism of belief, right?
They do. They push back hard on that. Reflective humanism argues that when it comes to institutions, believing has absolutely nothing to do with your inner conviction or your psychological trust.
Nothing.
Nothing. From the perspective of the system, your internal feelings are entirely irrelevant. To believe simply means to continue participating in the interference.
Hold on, I want to push back on that a little. Psychological trust has to matter.
Why?
Because if I don't trust a bank, I pull my money out of it.
Well,
My internal feeling of distrust directly drives the action that affects the system, doesn't it?
it feels that way to you, the individual.
Yeah.
But zoom out and look at it from the system's perspective.
Okay.
The banking system cannot detect your internal trust. It has no mechanism to measure your affection or your moral alignment.
Right.
The only thing the system detects is whether your money is deposited or withdrawn.
So the action is literally the only data point.
Precisely. Let's bring this right down to your everyday life. Think back to walking into a coffee shop to buy a drink.
Sure.
You hand over a physical paper dollar bill. When you do that, you don't need to summon a deep spiritual faith in the central bank.
No, I just want my coffee.
Exactly. You don't need to actively love the concept of fiat currency. And the cashier taking the money doesn't need to be a patriot who trusts the government with all their heart.
Honestly, you could both be absolute cynics.
You could be.
You could be standing there internally thinking the entire global financial system is a complete house of cards that is doomed to fail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as long as you physically hand over the paper and the cashier physically accepts it, that action is the belief.
Wow.
Your physical participation is the repetition that maintains the reality of the market.
Yeah.
You can leave your money in a bank purely out of laziness while actively hating the institution.
Right.
The bank's reality is maintained by the deposit, not by your psychological state.
Yeah.
The system does not require your soul. It only requires your compliance with the pattern.
That is wild. My internal monologue is totally irrelevant to the institution.
Completely irrelevant.
It's almost freeing in a way, but also deeply unsettling. It means the top keeps spinning regardless of whether the people spinning it actually want it to. As long as our hands keep flicking it, the reality holds.
And this raises an incredibly important observation about the scale of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
The sources emphasize that the state, the market, the currency, and the law, they all share this exact same structural DNA.
They're all just interference patterns.
Yes. They are not sustained by moral rightness. They are not sustained by genuine human affection or unwavering psychological trust.
Right.
They are sustained exclusively by the relentless rhythm of our participation.
Right.
Every single time you file a tax return, every time you stop your car at a red light on an empty street.
When nobody is around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every time you use a piece of legal jargon to sign a contract, you are providing the momentum. You are maintaining the reality.
It totally shifts the burden of reality onto us, doesn't it?
It does.
We look at massive institutions and think they are these imposing, indestructible monoliths ruling over us from above. But really, they are utterly dependent on us waking up every single day and performing the exact same microactions to keep them alive.
We are the interference pattern.
We are, and understanding that is the key to understanding why a collision gradient, that transparent pain we discussed earlier, is so destabilizing to a society.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when a reality collapses, it rarely happens because everyone suddenly had an ideological awakening and decided to rebel.
Right, it's much simpler than that.
Reality dissolves simply when the repetition breaks down. A currency doesn't collapse because people stop loving it. It collapses when people stop accepting it in transactions.
Exactly. The participation stops, the interference pattern breaks, and the reality vanishes.
So what does this all mean? If we look back at the big picture of everything we've explored today, the reality you live in right now, the laws that govern you, the money in your bank account, the borders of your country, none of it is a permanent structure made of stone.
No, it's very fluid.
It is a delicate, continuous pattern of overlapping meanings. It is an ongoing performance kept alive by language, by records, and most importantly, by your daily physical participation. You are the momentum keeping the top spinning.
Which brings us to the ultimate question posed by reflective humanism in these texts.
Lay it on me.
If institutions are not truly believed in internally, but are simply maintained through our outward actions,
Right.
what are you actually participating in every day? When you follow the rules, are you upholding a fundamental truth, or are you just preventing the transparent pain of a collapsing reality?
Man, that is a profound thing to carry into your day. Am I following the rules because they are true or just because I don't want the server to crash?
It's a heavy question.
It is. And before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought that builds on the mechanics we've uncovered in these sources.
Okay.
Toward the end of the material, there's this brief discussion describing artificial intelligence as a new, pervasive atmospheric field.
Yes, the atmospheric field.
It's described as something that surrounds us, constantly taking in data and processing language. Now think about the maintenance mechanisms we discussed earlier: language, records, and rules.
Right, the things that maintain the interference pattern.
Exactly. If our shared reality is solely maintained by the constant loop of repeating those elements, what happens when artificial intelligence begins to handle that repetition for us?
That's a staggering thought.
What happens when an algorithm is the thing writing our legal records? What happens when predictive text generates our language and automated systems enforce our rules and sanctions without human intervention?
Who is maintaining the reality then?
Right. If AI takes over the daily repetition that maintains our systems, will it simply maintain our current human reality? Or will we unknowingly find ourselves participating in a brand new interference pattern? An entirely new reality, designed, stabilized, and maintained by machines?
That changes everything.
It really does. Keep that question in mind the next time you use your phone to automatically pay for a coffee and step back into the reality of your day.